I love this little scene that you've created here with, I love this beautiful brushwork and colors you've done in the stone bridge there. It gives it a lot of texture and interest without, being really detailed. I love this willow tree. Willows are one of my favorite trees in the world, so I'm just really drawn by this image, and I think you did a beautiful job. Uh, you've got some color contrast going with the purple blues and the yellows and the greens. Makes a beautiful contrast with the colors, and nice work here on the shadow under the bridge. So let me talk a little bit about things that I might have done differently, and just most of them are in terms of lighting and focal point, I would say. Um, First of all, your lighting is here coming from the back. Uh, this whole scene is backlit if you look at both the direction of your shadow and the way that this is lit behind and then shadowed in front. But that's not really following through in terms of, I see a lot of light on this side of the bridge, and I see a lot of light on this side of the tree. So that's kind of not following through. It's a little bit confusing to me. So I like the backlit idea. So let's think about that. The lighting is kind of being more consistent with your lighting source. And the other thing that I think is really important in this one is determining your focal point and then editing out and minimizing the other elements to try to come to a more feeling of a focal point in this image. Right now there's a little bit of busyness going on because you have sort of equal emphasis. Remember, the things that emphasize your focal point are edges, crisp edges, darks and lights, so it's where the darkest darks are and the lightest light, the most detail. And I'm finding those things in a lot of different areas on your painting. So here's a very light versus a very dark in this shadow area, and they're coming together with some very crisp edges in here. Very light, very dark. We've got the other thing that brings more attention is very saturated color. So you've got some very saturated color here. My kitty's helping me. I don't know if you can see her. Saturated color here as well. You've got crisp edges in here. And then, of course, you've got this very crisp edge, very strong light-dark pattern here in the shadow. So what that does is when I first look at this image, I go directly to this shadow. That's what draws my eye first, and it brings my eye down here over to this very light area, dark area, and then I'm kind of wondering why. I like the shadow except for the fact that it's completely drawing my eye as if that is the focal point in the image. And I think you have so much more pretty things going on in the tree and in the shapes of the tree that this very dark shadow is kind of competing. It's also not, if this were the shadow of this tree, you would see the shadow mimicking the shape of the tree instead of being so straight. Anyway, so I think you would be better deciding where your focal point is in the image and then minimizing some of those side things that are going on. You've also got a lot of edges and a lot of interest going on down here in the shadow, and especially in this area that draws your attention, very light, very dark, right to the edge of your painting, which you never really want to do, draw your eye to the edge of the painting. So I think I always think about it in terms of, well, if I were going to do this painting, what would I change? And So here you can see some of the changes I would have made. Just overall backing up and looking at that versus this. Oops, sorry. What do I want to do? Oh, sorry. Okay, here, a lot of lights and darks, a lot of things going on, a lot of places that your eye is drawn. Here, here, to me, it's just a little busy, I guess I would say. And here, what I've done, okay, so let me go over the things that I've done on this that are a little bit different that I'm addressing. First, I'm addressing that backlighting, and I made this whole area more in shadow. You can see I shadowed out the front of the bridge because the light is coming from behind, so that area would be much more shadowed. I've left the interest and the texture there, but I've just minimized that whole bridge. It's still there, and you still have that interest going on, but it's not capturing the attention as much. I've also minimized, I got rid of this background stuff here completely, edited that out because it was drawing a lot of attention, creating more detail that I just didn't think was necessary. Instead, my focus is on the tree and on bringing the eye to this interest area here. And I'm doing that. What you can see is all of your lines here, the line of the bridge, the line of the tree, all these lines lead your eye. All those lead your eye. But in this case, they're kind of leading my eye inward, but I'm jumping around. It's here, but I'm back here. It's here, but I'm back here. It's not giving me a nice payoff to the leading lines. Whereas in this case, I've chosen this area as my focal area, and then I've used all the tools in my tool belt to bring your eye here and then to have a payoff with something interesting going on. So I got rid of this area, I darkened this area. Back here in the distance, beyond the bridge, you can see you've got a lot of edges there. And what I've done is just softened all those edges, softened all those transitions between the water, between the bridge, the way the transitions go between the light on the bridge and the dark. I like having that dark there. It creates right here my darkest darks and my lightest lights. So it brings my focal point in to the center of the painting instead of having the focal point out here to the edges of the painting and to the areas that are less important. So I softened all that background. I've added another thing going on with you back here is bringing in, integrating the colors in your painting. So I always like to, these colors back here, these oranges and yellows, are only back here. They're isolated back there. So instead of that, I've dimmed and softened those edges and then brought some of those colors into the foreground, into where I want the eye to come. And that's where you've got more crisp edges, more detail, more interest is here in the foreground, bringing your eye into the foreground and into our area, focal area. So I've added these oranges and yellows in shadow, and then the orange and yellows in light. You've noticed I've gotten rid of that harsh shadow line of the trunk completely, and instead just created a shadow area which creates interesting patterns without creating a line that draws the eye more specifically. I've created some shadow here and some shadow here because you don't want, again, your lightest lights and your darkest darks in the edges of your painting. You don't want to draw your eye to these edges, to these corners. You want to minimize that area so that the eye is drawn back into the center of the painting and not drawn out to the edges where it's takes you off of the painting and away from what you're doing. I've created more light, so assuming our light is coming from over here, so it's tripping over the top of the wall and in, so you see in a little light showing here and you see more light here versus darker areas here. It's really important to create, when you have this big area of tree here, to create a variation of color and value across this big area so there's some change. It's not all the same color and value. So I've created a variation from the lighter colors. I've added more greens in here, a variation of colors from just the yellows to yellows and greens, and then varying into the shadows over here. So that keeps our eye back here where you have the most crispness. These are more blended out. The shadow edges are blended out. And then you have more crispness and edges and detail in the center. I've added a little detail in some light hitting the tree here for some more interest. I've also brought some of these darks of the trunk into some little indicating maybe some of these branches are coming down a little bit, and softened up those stark edges of the tree trunk right there so that it's not so harsh. We have more overlapping, but we also have more indication of maybe some of those twigs and branches just here and there coming down into the tree. The water, I wanted more separation between the reflection in the water and the tree itself. It's kind of hard to see here. There's not a lot of change between those two, so we get these harsh edges, and it's a little less distinct what's shadow and what's tree. So I've just softened those edges, softened those colors a little bit, made them less distinct so that you can tell this is reflection, and then added those little white lines there, these little water ripples up against the edge of the bank, and these horizontal water ripples give you more of a water feeling to be able to tell that this is water here as opposed to, so you can kind of see that shows water a little more. I gave some more lights in here in the rocks where they're in light and have more of a distinct pattern between shadow areas and light areas there, instead of having it sort of being the same all the way along. There's some more distinct light and shadow patterns. I think that's the totality of what I did. So we've got shadow on this side, more shadow here, not quite so light. Brought my interest in my focal area right here by creating that area having the most interest, the most edges, the most detail, the most color and value changes and variations, and then easing out the rest of it, making that a little less distinct, getting rid of the harsh shadow that was taking us nowhere except for off of the page and off of your painting there. And hopefully that's helpful, Catherine, and hope my voice has lasted this whole time, but I feel it about to start into a coughing fit again, so I think I will stop there. Beautiful painting. As always, my suggestions are simply that, ideas and what I might have done differently. You know, you always want to look for a focal point, and then am I using my tools, edges, values, and color and detail to emphasize my focal point and to lead the eye around and through the painting? Am I creating gradations, variations of interest in my big areas, and creating a path and an eye for your eye to follow as you invite your viewer into your painting and show them all the different things that you've created. Focal point, editing, using your tools, and all those things we try to bring into each painting we do. So I hope that's helpful for you, Catherine, and thank you for sharing your beautiful painting with me. I will be talking to you soon.